Hello Jobinlings and welcome to Jobin.cloud's latest 2025 major update. Well, it actually came out on Christmas, so it's a bit more of a Christmas gift. But either way, so what are the biggest features or biggest changes in this update? First of all, you may have noticed that the operations manager has a new overhaul. Essentially, it now has two different types of interfaces, a more basic global overview type view, which is this page over here, and it's the default opening display. And then a more detailed manage operations panel, which will go more in detail later, which is more akin to the original older version. But essentially, let me give you a rundown on how this interface works. So you're going to have the primary panel here in the middle that shows you what is actively running. These are all operations that are essentially going to run as soon as they get the chance. They are, let's say, overdue. And the only thing stopping them from running right away is either because they've been paused, like in this case, or the human simulated pace throttle. But you can also find the scheduled section, which shows all operations that are scheduled for a future date. So if I were to hover over the date on this operation and press reschedule, I can reschedule the operation to a different timestamp. And when I press reschedule, it will no longer be part of my active queue because it no longer needs to run now. And it's instead now in my scheduled section where I can see that it's going to run in 7 days. In this case, it's paused, so it's not going to be running anytime soon. But I can at any time press resume. You can always hover over the status of an operation and a dedicated action will appear. In the case of pause, a resume option will appear, but in the case of other types of operations like running, you'll have a pause option. In the case of in queue, you'll have a run now operation to make it run right away. So essentially the key takeaway is that there's a lot of on hover type commands. Simply hover over the operation you want to manage and you'll be able to change the status, or change the date, or cancel the operation. And there's then a handy refresh button if you just want to refresh and see any of the latest changes. But the active queue and scheduled queue aside, there are also a dedicated error panel and a successful panel. This specifically divides and essentially extracts any contacts from the general active or scheduled queue that have successfully completed or that had an error. Essentially, what's been going on in the last 7 days as far as completed operations, and in the case of errors, what are the operations that need my attention? For sake of example, I've gone ahead and added 2 sample errors to my error list. The way it works is it will display the error message, in this case sample error, then it will display the number of contacts in the batch quantity, and to interact with it, we're going to want to open the details panel. By pressing details, we'll be able to see which contacts were affected by the error, and we'll have the option to either individually resume or retry the operation on a specific contact, or the option to simply abort it. But that aside, there's also a bulk option to in bulk retry or in bulk abort all the operations that have this specific error message. This helps in streamlining your workflow because imagine that, say for example, an email campaign you've launched is failing with the error message email is missing. And well, it's going to be kind of hard to kind of resume the operation from there, but like this, every contact that failed to receive their email will be nicely grouped in this specific collection, and from here is where you can then easily essentially select the contacts to further interact with them. That's where you can then hypothetically add their email addresses, and once you've added all the emails, you can then easily just bulk retry them all and have all those emails resume sending out accordingly. Besides these specific detailed actions, you can also run a bulk global action on all errors that you have in your list. So you can either press the abort action, which will essentially abort every error in the entire errors list, or the bulk retry, which will retry every error in the errors list. As for the successful list, this will auto clear every 7 days, but you can also manually press archive at any time, and this will clear out the list for you as well. These 3 different operation overviews aside, there is also an operation counter that applies for the latest activity within the last 24 hours. This includes LinkedIn related outreach operations, this includes email outreach operations, and this specifically includes all import type operations. There's also a week graph which shows you what's been going on in each day of the week. So for example, on Tuesday, I've run essentially all the imports and 1 LinkedIn message. On Monday, I've sent 19 LinkedIn outreach operations, 3 emails, and 5 imports. And yeah, it kind of gives you a general overview of what's been going on. We can then view dashboard to go back to the classic dashboard page here on the left. But let's delve into the more detailed interface of the operations manager as well. So if I open manage operations, this gives us now a much more detailed interface, which includes various filters as well. The filters include which campaigns are running, which are the statuses or operation types, and bulk operations. These include essentially the bulk selections you're running in your contacts list. Say I make a selection of 20 contacts and I run a auto update operation on them. This is now going to be a new bulk operation. I'm going to see a specific bulk operation with a timestamp of when it's been run, and I can expand it to see exactly what that bulk operation was with that specific manual selection that I had run. But that aside, we can easily filter by, I can say, any of these, and we can expand them to see more details. So if I, for example, open this auto update operation, we can see the 2 sample error contacts from earlier, as well as all the other successful operations. But one of the main use cases for this scenario, for this interface, is especially with the statuses interface. Because once again from here, we can very easily see everyone that failed or is successful or is paused, and very easily we can bulk abort or retry. The added advantage here is that there's a details panel that shows you the details of exactly that operation. So if this were a message operation, I'd be able to actually read what that message is and what it's going to send out. And when expanded, it's also going to show me the details of what stage of the operation it is. So let me actually better clarify. The main details shown in this advanced operations module are campaign centric. Right now, the operations I've been running are not part of any campaign or sequence. So essentially, it's just saying these are all not in a sequence and there's no actual additional details. But this comes hand in hand with the sequences page overhaul as well. As you can see, there's a new graph with analytics. This is unfortunately not backwards compatible, so all the sequences you've already set up and built will all start out with 0 assignees. The counters will still progress, but they'll be starting off with a 0 total assignees. So it's always recommended to kind of just create a new sequence to avoid having the counters not make that much sense, since it's not fully backwards compatible. But that aside, let's say I've got a sequence with the messages and operations that are running, and this is actually one of the default templates. You can load them in at any time. You'll have them prompted whenever you press the Add Sequences button. You'll have all the templates appear in here. But that aside, from here in the sequence, all the actions we have in the sequence can be given custom names. Like this operation is called LinkedIn InMail free, this operation is called first email, parentheses plus InMail, and so on. Essentially, they all have a custom name. And these custom names will be used in that advanced operations module. We'll be able to specifically see the campaigns with the campaign operation and the name of that campaign operation. I'll create a quick example here. Call this example condition, and then along the true branch I'll be running a auto update operation, whereas on the false branch I'll be delaying it to, let's say, 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes I'll be running an assign operation for adding the example tag. Now let me show you in practice. I'm going to go over here to my contacts, select a bunch of profiles, add them to my sequence. And when I now go to my operations module, I will see the condition that's already running. If I hit refresh, I can see that it's completed by now. And if I open the manage operations, I can also see the Michael's sequence in here. That's the name I gave my sequence. And if I expand it, I can now actually see the details of that sequence. I can see who is in the example condition. So I can see all 8 contacts have completed the example condition operation. And there's a new batch of 8 that are scheduled in 5 minutes to be assigned. And any custom name I'm using in that sequence will automatically be embedded for me, so I can very easily tell what's going on in that sequence and have a very clear overview and grasp of the situation, as well as being able to bulk retry or cancel them. Back to the sequences page, besides the generic overview where we can see now that there's 8 ongoing contacts, I'll give you a quick rundown on what are these counters doing. Still ongoing is the counter of contacts that are in the sequence but have not completed the sequence yet. Replied are contacts that have completed the sequence because they responded. Then no response are contacts that have fully completed the sequence, meaning from start to finish they've completed all the steps, but they simply never responded. In this sequence's case, since we're not actually sending any messages, everyone will eventually end with no response. But failed is then also a counter for which contacts were unable to complete the sequence. So let me actually go back here and give you an example. I open my Michael sequence and I go over here and open the assign action, which is still pending, and I go and say, well, I want to cancel the operation for Gilvin. I can individually do that by opening details and hitting the cancel button. Since I'm aborting Gilvin's assign operation, I've essentially prevented Gilvin from completing the sequence. This means that when I now go to my sequences page, I can now see that there is one failed, essentially Gilvin, which was unable to fully complete. And this is just a quick basic overview of what's going on and how things are progressing, but you can open a detailed dashboard from specifically the activities in that sequence by opening the reports and statistics page over here. And I don't really have any data for this yet since I'm not running any outreach, but if I have emails or invitations, I will have a dedicated email and invitation graph that shows me, for example, bounce rates, responses, open rates, or acceptance rates in case of invitations, and also an exit statistic that tells me how many contacts have concluded the sequence and in which way. And in fact, we can see that, no one completed the sequence yet, but one of them failed, Gilvin, which we cancelled earlier. But besides that, there's also some timeline graphs that give us a timeline of all the messages, emails, and so on throughout the days, as well as some performance graphs, which tell us specifically what steps or what stages in the sequence are performing better. Now, there aren't any actual outreach steps in this sequence, so this graph is just empty, but you're going to see essentially node points with a line, essentially a line graph, and then a column of data on each of those nodes. And what it represents is it's going to represent each action within the sequence. So if you go back to the sequence here, we have the sequence representing each of the outreach messages or emails and so on. And its purpose is in telling us which emails or which follow-ups are working better or worse than others. Essentially, it's going to be telling me which one gets more responses and what types of responses is it getting. But let me give you some more context. Where I keep referencing the type of response. This is another of the updates. Essentially, Jobin will now be able to actually tell what type of response are we receiving. Was it not interested? Was it interested? Was it inconclusive? Do they want to be contacted later? Essentially, we can go in detail on exactly what they responded. And how are we achieving that? Well, we're achieving it by adding a reply identification to each of our sequences. Each new sequence you create will always be given the default reply categorizations, and this interface will be reworked. But essentially, how this works is with the use of AI, you can tell the AI what information to try and identify in each reply that you receive. These are the defaults, so it's going to say if the reply is interested, not interested, interested later, or inconclusive. But you can add your own. This means that you can customize them to your every given scenario. Say that I'm sending a specific salary offer, and I want to make sure, are they happy with the salary or not? So I can say if the reply is salary insufficient, then, and that's where the magic happens. Not only does this help us in being able to categorize the reply for better reply identification, better reports and statistics essentially, but we can also run trigger actions. So if the reply is salary insufficient, then we want to, for example, assign a specific tag, we want to add them to a specific stage in the pipeline, or we can launch an entire automated sequence. So I could say if the salary is insufficient, launch my additional job position benefits sequence. And just like that, fully automatically, I'm essentially then sending them out additional benefits to hopefully compensate for the insufficient salary that they mentioned in that message. And an additional feature unique to the inconclusive reply is that we can finally handle those vague types of responses. How often does it happen that someone just responds okay or thanks? Now, this is more common on LinkedIn conversations, but it can also happen on emails. And what it ends up doing in classic type sequences is that, well, it ends up, being detected as a reply and it stops your sequence. But in this case, if we want, we can say that an inconclusive reply should actually be completely ignored. So we can enable this continue sequence if reply is unclear/inconclusive, and when toggled on, this means that if the reply is inconclusive, we're just going to continue the sequence as if nothing happened. Then, last but not least, is the account claiming functionality. You can now essentially claim LinkedIn accounts and email accounts in your Jobin profile. Say, for example, here I have 2 different LinkedIn accounts claimed under my Jobin account. This means that I am essentially the owner of these accounts and I can choose to share them with others. This means that I can choose to allow team members in my work group to send messages on behalf of this LinkedIn account, and this allows them to send a message and select me as a sender in that operation. Now this option is only available for team members in the workgroup, so of course if the person is not in the workgroup, they will not have access to the send on behalf functionalities. And when I press share, I also have a share settings option where I can enable or disable the send on behalf, but I also have the option to show all inbox messages, which allows me to essentially share my conversations that are occurring with this LinkedIn account, so essentially my LinkedIn conversations. And this can further help streamline collaborating with team members on mutual projects. Similarly, you can also manage all the connected emails with the same share functionalities as the LinkedIn accounts. An additional quick feature related to emails is that now you can also add HTML. So if I want, I can toggle it over to HTML and I can just paste in whatever HTML coding I want to have images, styling, and I guess, any types of fancy stuff. And the HTML functionality is also available for just standard email sendouts. So this means that not only can the signature have HTML, but also the emails themselves. Furthermore, from this interface, you can also manage all the shared accounts. So from an admin perspective, this makes life a lot easier because everyone in the workgroup that is sharing their account will appear in this list, and you'll be able to very systematically and easily tell their activity and get a global overview of essentially what they're sending out and what they're doing. Now, of course, keep in mind this activity is within the last 24 hours, so it's mostly just to know if they did something today. If you actually want analytics, then you're going to want to go either to the dashboard or to the sequences page to have more details with a time selector. And last but not least is a time frame option. You can now specifically add a time frame of when outreach operations are allowed to send out. So like this, you can now easily send messages and sequences and have them all added to your queue without worrying that they send out in the middle of the night or on the weekends when people are less likely to actually be engaging or responding to those messages. This pretty much wraps up all the latest changes in the current major update. There are some smaller nuances like the option to filter for stages without having to select the pipeline, which we've had requested by many users, and some other snippets. I'll add more details in the video description. Also, we're announcing a Discord channel, so if you want to check that out and connect with like-minded people, you can find that in the video description as well. Be seeing you, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.